In this video, we'll cover how to build more complex logic using what we call components, which are designed for reusability and to create multi-dimensional models. For this example, we're going to add logic to calculate a specific revenue line item instead of just directly typing in inputs. I'm going to use a simple manufacturing business that would be selling specific products at certain unit prices and costs. I've already updated the variable names in our income statement to be product revenue and product COGS, and I cleared out the old values that had been typed in from the previous videos. You can quickly clear out any row by right-clicking and selecting Clear Values. First, let's show the canvas again. I'm going to select product revenue and then locate it in the canvas. Then I'm also going to open up this revenue schedules group. This is where I'll build the logic for calculating product revenue so that it stays organized and any intermediate calculations or nodes that I might use won't show up in my income statement. To start building the logic, first create a group and name it accordingly. Expand the group, and then we're going to convert this group into a component. This tells Logica that you intend to use this group in particular for calculations and not just organization. For this specific calculation, we're going to use the number of units times a sales price per unit, which means I'll need to add 2 input nodes to this component. An option to add multiple nodes at once is to right-click on the destination group and select Insert Node. You'll have the option to select how many nodes you want to enter at once. The first one will be named Number of Units. And that will stay as a variable because I want the input to change over time. The second we'll call Sales Price per Unit. This will be a constant as I want to use the same price for the entire model timeframe. If you want to build in pricing changes over time into your model, then leave it as a variable. Then add a third node that we'll call product revenue, which will contain the result of the logic we're building. Last thing we need is a multiplication operator because we're going to multiply the 2 inputs together and calculate product revenue. Now what I'm going to do is actually switch to the view where the specific revenue schedule is shown so that we can follow along a little more closely. This template already had a view set up for revenue, so I can actually select that outer group, select the view called Inputs, Revenue, and COGS, and then show the canvas one more time. I can already see that the view is now displaying this new component that I added with the variables shown as rows, number of units and product revenue, and the constants as columns, sales price per unit. Now we're going to create links. I'm going to zoom in on this particular component so that it's easier to see some of the details. I'm going to switch the layout to horizontal tree compact because it works really well for multiplication layout. I'm going to start by connecting the 2 inputs, the number of units and sales price per unit. And the idea is that each input needs its own unique link connected to the multiplication. I'm going to click and drag and connect a link to the multiplication from number of units. and then create a second link to the same multiplication from sales price. The final link is to connect from the multiplication to product revenue. The key is to hover over the middle of the multiplication, find either of the gray dots on the right or the left, click and drag into product revenue, which automatically becomes white, indicating it is an output or calculated node now. If I show the formula bar and select product revenue, I can see the formulas displayed and is the equivalent of saying number of units times sales price per unit. Take note of the direction of the links coming from the inputs into the multiplication operator and flowing to the output node called product revenue. Now let's test out the calculation logic by adding specific input values and updating some formatting. Since number of units is a core input, I'm going to highlight it blue, and I'll freeze columns to make it easier to see the sales price per unit. Let's start by adding in the price. Now we can start typing in assumptions for the number of units over time for each month. So 100 units sold in January would result in $1,000 of product revenue. I'll change the formatting for number of units as well as revenue. Now as I type in more assumptions, I can see that the calculation is updating automatically. Finally, I can connect this node, product revenue, into the node in the income statement. This makes product revenue in the income statement also be calculated, which creates a more dynamic version of the revenue model instead of just hard-coded inputs from the previous videos. Any changes I make to the specific inputs from that revenue component will automatically calculate and flow through to update the income statement. I could also trace the logic visually, top down, by starting with the income statement, showing the canvas, selecting product revenue, and tracing backwards by following the links all the way back to the specific inputs. I can do the inverse and go bottom up, tracing the specific inputs back to the income statement. I can see the same connections from the right side panel, so it's easy to navigate directly while following along visually. To trace backwards, follow the from direction, and to trace forwards, follow the to direction. This is an incredibly powerful way to visually see what's driving different parts of the model.